Well, so we have to do the discussions. And I have John Kuma. He's a legal practitioner, but foremostly also a member of the MPP. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, my brother.
Are you going to court today?
Definitely.
Great.
Definitely.
Which chambers? It's not. Yes.
Protect chambers. It's at Adabraka.
Okay. Very good. Man, I have an office at Adabraka. I'll come and pay you.
Come. You are more than invited.
And Atik Mohammed is here. He's the General Secretary of the PNC.
Okay.
How are you, Atik?
I'm good.
You've been working the last few months.
Yeah, sure. It's been tiring, but we are good.
Okay, thanks for joining me. So we know foremostly we have to start the discussions, but Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo Addo has been paying homage to the Otumfuo Setu, the Asante Hene.
Yes, let me say good morning to our viewers. And to
that's your home region, right?
Yes, that's my home region. I'm from Ejoso. I actually contested the Ejoso seat.
The primaries?
The primaries.
Okay, so it means you go again? 20.
Definitely. No, I'm not going again. I'm going to win next time.
He's serving notice to the incumbent that he should get ready.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Who is the elect?
His Honorable Osio Diomi.
But you contest him again?
Oh, definitely. So let me say good morning to our viewers and to thank the people of Ghana, everybody, for the peaceful nature we all conducted ourselves during these elections. And we thank God for the sweet victory he gave the NPP. And of course, our strongest base was Kumasi, because that's the center of Ashanti region. And everybody knows that the NPP, our strongest region is the Ashanti region. And so Nana Addo took opportunity of the Aukude, which the Otumfuo was celebrating, to go and thank the people of Ashanti for the massive support and encouragement that we gave to Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo Addo. You know, all the propaganda by the NDC, especially the Dispatch newspaper, Ben Efsin, about the so-called Achim and Asante row that never exists. Always people want to divide this nation on tribal lines. And I am happy that even though Nana Addo is an Achim, he can boast with all the confidence that his strongest support in Ghana is with the Ashantis. And he took advantage to go and thank them and for his support, and of course to also ask for the blessings of Otumfuo for a successful governance, because campaigning to win an election is one thing. Governing to satisfy the needs of the people and providing, of course, fulfilling your promises during the campaign is also another thing. And beyond the Thanksgiving, I'm told that on 18th, which is on Sunday, in fact, to start on Friday, where the Muslims will all go to the Aboso.
You mean we're going to have a 3-day celebration?
Where prayer, thanksgiving, and praises. Prayer, praises, and thanksgiving services.
Prayer, praises, and thanksgiving.
Yes, prayer, praises, and thanksgiving services. Yes, on Friday. So Friday will be the mosque, the national mosque. That one will be led by the Muslim leaders in our party, with the national chief imam at the national mosque at Aboso. And then the Sunday service will be at the Accra Sports Stadium, where all those believe in the Christian faith will also
converging
at the Accra Sports Stadium. Yes. In fact, the uniform is strictly white with white handkerchief, because you know the slogan for our campaign was "The battle is the Lord's," and Nana Addo quoted 2 Samuel when David told Goliath that you come to me with your sword and the name of your gods, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, and that this battle is of the Lord's. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, everybody attests to the fact that NPP, we were hopeful to win, but not the extent of victory that we got with the number of seats in Parliament and with the massive endorsement, over 1.2 million votes difference. I mean, when was the last time you heard that? And this is the first time any opposition party has won one touch without going for a runoff. And the margin is simply unbelievable. This could only be by the work of God. And we are very grateful to God for his show of support, his mandate to the Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo Addo and the NPP to govern Ghana for the next 4 years. Nana has indicated that he wants to rule under the guidance of God. And you can only do that when you show appreciation by praising him and thanking him and of course giving back to him all the glory. So we are very hopeful that the next 4 years is going to be a period of prosperity and massive development for Ghana, and we'll go into the details of the pledges that we made. I can assure everybody, the nurses, the teachers, the allowances, the $1 million, all those things. In fact, even in our first budget, the first budget, the NPP first budget that will be read, most of these promises will be addressed in the first budget of the NPP. I'm very hopeful about that.
Have you drafted a budget?
Well, there's already a temporary budget that was submitted by this government in November up to the first quarter. So the NPP will have opportunity to present another budget after the first quarter, I think up to April or March. So in that budget, that's what I'm talking about.
By the incoming finance minister?
Yes, by the incoming finance minister. I don't know. Now the power is with the president-elect. He decides who serve in the next government.
So now that Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo Addo is gone to the Otumfuo, we know that earlier he had been with the Greater Accra Regional House of Chiefs, also paying homage to them and thanking them, but also seeking their support. Seems to be the refrain and also the right thing to do, appropriately.
Yeah, thank you, Roland. Let me say good morning to your viewers. I think that, first and foremost, let me commend all Ghanaians for the peaceful manner in which we conducted ourselves. And for me, I think that what we did confirms the fact that we have grown as a democracy, and that these exaggerated claims about, oh, Ghana is likely to head up the creek whenever there is an election and so on, I'm sure with what has happened now, all those claims will be dismissed. And we'll begin to tell ourselves that elections are just like any other normal activity that we undertake in this country. And so people must begin to appreciate that Ghana has grown, and we have demonstrated that in the last election. Beyond that also, I think that there was an agenda for change. And that agenda was led by almost 5 candidates, if I'm not mistaken. Almost all those 5 candidates were preaching change, and so the change agenda really had so many people propagating it. Fortunately, I think the change project won at the end of the day. I would have loved that it would be my candidate winning the elections. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But nonetheless, the change agenda was still the winner at the end of the day. And to that extent, I'm grateful to Ghanaians for making the decision. I think they were split between taking the risk of sharing their votes amongst the other 4 candidates and going for one particular candidate whom in their estimation is stronger amongst is the strongest amongst the 5, who can actually deliver the change project in a manner that is convincing. And I think eventually they settled on Nana Akufo Addo. And let me officially on this platform say congratulations to him and to the MPP. And I think that his victory came with so many record-breaking, if you like, perspectives. He's the first from opposition, like John has said, to have won an election straight away without having to contend with the difficulties of a second round. And if you look at the victory, the margin for me is very humiliating to some extent. 1 million and over is no easy a feat. I mean, it's not an easy feat to chalk by somebody in opposition and by somebody who has suffered the worst of vilifications, who has suffered all kinds of, if you like, unacceptable things by people in government and so on. But the other thing is now, and this is a problem, even though it is good news for the MPP, but I see that to be a slight problem. The incompetence of the NDC was so huge that it even caused a lot of their MPs to lose their seats. Now, we are likely to have a one-sided parliament, and that for me is even though it is to the excitement of the MPP, but I find that a little problematic. And it is all by the grace of the incompetence and the hardships that were visited upon us by the outgoing administration. This is telling all of us politicians that you cannot take the people for granted. You may think that what you are doing is okay, but once the people begin to complain genuinely that all is not well, you ought to have that listening ear. And on this, let me specifically speak to this issue of Nane's visit to Otumfo. I think if like you rightly intimated, it appears he's embarking on a visit to all our traditional rulers, all the institutions of chieftaincy. And he started with the Greater Accra House of Chiefs. He's gone to the Otumfo. I'm hoping that he will move beyond Otumfo to other chieftaincy institutions, and I hope he does so. And for me, the issues he's told them, or the things he's told them, that he's committed to delivering on the promises he made to the good people of this country. And I have no reason to doubt his commitment, because he comes into this with just one agenda: make sure that we help our people into prosperity. And he keeps repeating that. I am confident he can deliver on the promises. And I would wish we had some 30 seconds for me to say this. Before the administration could even take off, people are saying, oh, he will fail.
No,
people are already...
Oh, sure. We'll get it because we'll speak on the economy. Because we know that during the campaigning, you know the Gbese Mantse.
Yeah.
There's an issue right now which is currently topical about him saying that he would have abdicated his throne or stool if Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo Addo won. But we know that it's a campaign issue as well. But we wanted to situate that in the context of the Constitution and the roles that chiefs play in the context of customs as well as traditions and culture. So we decided to speak to a research fellow in the African Studies Department of the University of Ghana, Legon. And Dr. Obadele Kambon is joining us through Skype. And a very good morning to you, sir. Good morning. How are you? How are you, Dr. Kambon? Good morning. But on that very issue.
Yes, on this issue of Ni
yes, and then you relate to how traditional leaders, you know, behaved during the campaign.
I think it's unfortunate. I had reason to raise concern about the way...
You did?
I did. How chiefs were stumbling over one another in endorsement of presidential candidates. I found that to be utterly unacceptable, because the position you occupy places you in such a position as to be able to relate with everybody and anybody, especially people with political affiliations. So for you to openly endorse one candidate is to block access to all others who don't belong to the party, you know, of the candidate you endorsed. And I found that very unacceptable. And in any case, our laws are very clear on what role chiefs can play. You have a great deal of responsibility. You are supposed to become partners in development. You are supposed to be agents in helping government at the lower levels do that which is necessary for our people and so on. And you've slumbered on that job for the most part, only to wake up and all you do is to be endorsing people. Some go as far as even inviting ghosts to descend on people who don't support the candidates they have endorsed and so on. And for me, the thing it exposed was the fact that our traditional, or let me say, our chieftaincy institution is gradually losing its relevance. And once that happens, what it means is that people no longer will have regard for that institution. And that is very, very dangerous. This man risked his throne on for what? Politics? It doesn't make sense to me.
He didn't risk it, he just made a speech.
No, you see, chiefs are not like you and I. Chiefs are not like you and I, who are free to make all kinds of comments and probably go away with those comments and without anybody asking for you to fulfill whatever comments it is that you made. These are people who represent some respect, they represent some significance in our society. So their words are not just to be taken lightly, and unlike politicians who can make statements and go away with those statements and so on. But you are a chief. Your words are supposed to be sacrosanct of a sort, or somewhat sacrosanct. Now you've made these statements. Time for you to deliver on your on your claims or on your promise that you have made is becoming a difficulty. I watched actually a journalist from Metro TV trying to reach him. When he called him, he said, I beg you, I don't want any interview. I said, You didn't. Nobody begged you to make the comments you made. You actually said these things publicly.
It was on a political platform. It's normal.
Why? As a chief, that is not what you're supposed to do. Now you've said things and they are coming back to haunt you, and you are running everywhere for cover and so on. I think that the good people of Ghana must demand his resignation, because he has brought the institution of that. He has brought that office into disrepute. And if they allow him to continue sitting on that throne, I think that if you like, the shame that he has brought upon that stool will smear every other Ghana, and I think that is unacceptable. They must demand his immediate resignation. In any case, I am told there are even issues with his throne and all that. So if I were this chief, I would be more guided in the comments I make. I would be more careful. I would not do things that would position me in such a state as to be easily kicked out. The people of Ghana, the respect that we all afford and accord the stool because of the conduct of this chief is gradually waning. And I think that it is your responsibility to demand a restoration of that respect by asking him to kindly and respectfully step aside. Otherwise, look, how is he expected to relate with the new administration? And they are supposed to, at some point, be the interface between the people and government. So if he has already compromised that position and that responsibility that by reason of his office is conferred on him, I think it will become difficult for the people he's supposed to be representing to enjoy the full fruits of this administration. The earlier you demand his resignation, the better it will be for the people he superintends over.
But within the campaign, Don Kuma, we had all forms of and all types of chieftaincy institutions and chiefs representing various traditional areas and paramountcies, endorsing both sides. The election could have gone either way. Of course, they always say heroes have got a lot of friends and villains have no friends. So, so all the vilification of the Gbese Mantse in the media and the trolling, as we currently have the lexicon for how we use social media and the way we taunt people, perhaps it's a bit uncalled for. What do you think?
Well, first of all, our laws have sought to protect the office of chiefs and chieftaincy as an institution because of the high regard we have for them traditionally. And when a chief voluntarily comes out to bet with his office that in this election, if a particular candidate wins, I'm going to abdicate my stool. I don't know what motivated such a high-ranking chief to make such a comment, especially when it was needless. It was not required in any way. You could still advance your support for any candidate as a chief, because the Constitution only says that they are not supposed to do partisan politics. It doesn't mean chiefs are not supposed to do politics. They can't do a certain level of politics, but it must not be partisan, like this particular chief did. If a particular candidate wins, I'm going to abdicate my stool. Now, words are so important. In fact, God has said that he has lifted his words above his name. So your word is your honor. And any man who doesn't respect his own words is not worth any respect. And more so when you are a chief and you voluntarily commit your chieftaincy to a certain condition, nobody should be calling on him to do what is honorable. But looking at Gbese Mantse, formerly known as Tommy Okai, and anybody who knows him in that person that he was, will forgive this particular chief. You should forgive him, because this is a football fan. I mean, his background is that he's a footballer, or let me say he was into football administration or football administrator who loves to brag going into competition. I mean, Kotoko and Has, you could always remember this man betting even his life into a match. And he was always doing well, sometimes winning and losing. So we should all forgive Gbese Mantse, because his background as a football administrator makes him make such comments, thinking that it is the usual bragging right that you have going into a competition. So I seriously think that even though as chief, his word is his honor, he can be held responsible for what he said, but I think that we must forgive him as a people because of his background and the fact that he thinks that every contest requires people to brag, as in football competition. I mean, it's normal. Anybody who loves football and who loves competition between us and Kotoko, sometimes it helps to even bring more people into the stadium. You know, it is part of the temperature,
creating the
atmosphere for contest. So we must look at him in that capacity and forgive him for the comment he made. In fact, it is not the best looking at the office he occupies now. But when we also want to hold him
But John
strictly,
Kuma, we also know that times have changed. Modernity has come in, and we have a certain dispensation which seem to have permeated the type of governance practice across the world. So how do we then fit in these very traditional authorities?
Well, they must still be where they are. You see, there was a time in this country where I remember there was the first president, Kwame Nkrumah, who sought to these two chiefs who were not in support of his government. And that thing really affected our traditional rules, our traditional customs, and how our chiefs were chosen, and it brought problems and instability to our traditional system. We cannot sacrifice our way of life, which is our traditions, at the expense of politics. And nobody stops any chief from doing politics. You can abdicate, as he said, and join partisan politics if you want to. But as long as you wish to remain in the traditional setup, avoid being MPP or NDC or PNC or those things. I remember one NP on our side in the north. He used to work with Tor. Yeah. He said he wants to join the traditional. His people are calling on him to become the chief. Talon or Talensi. Yeah. That's why we went for by-election in Talensi. So he had to resign from politics and become a traditional leader. Yes. So nobody is restricting. If it's modernity you want to join, nobody is stopping you.
So you're saying it's a choice?
It's a choice.
And if you make that choice, you have to
respect the rules within the choice you have made. And let's all make our nation governable, and we should stay within our limits.
And we have on the line Dr. Obadele Kabon. He is a senior research fellow with the African Studies Department of the University of Ghana. Very good morning to you, Dr. Obadele Gabon. Now, particularly when we know that things seem to be shifting the way they are, how in reverence should we be holding the traditional authorities or the chiefs, and how should be the linkages between them and then the politicians or the political parties or the political structure?
Okay, yes, very good for having me. I hope I can be heard.
Yes, you're clear.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, if you recall during the elections, the Asante Hene, and actually it's similar to the comment that your last speaker said, he advised those under him to either, if they want to join politics, party politics, that they should step down as chiefs. And I think that this was, you know, a very good precedent, that it can cause a lot of confusion, just as we're seeing that if you say, okay, if this particular political party loses power, then I will step down, then it causes complications. And I'm reminded of a promise that Wale Soyinka just made with reference to the U.S. election, where he said that if Trump wins, exactly, that he would tear up his green card. And now, you know, after that, people are saying, all right, we'll go ahead and do it. So he says, okay, well, I'll have to go ahead and do it. That when you make a promise, then the words that you say, they stand, you know, there and wait for you. And, you know, Wale Soyinka, while he's in a different position than a traditional chief, that you can see the similarity when a public figure comes out in massive support of a particular political party. The Gbese chief's main responsibility is towards his own people, not to a particular party. And in that party, you have people who are from various different ethnic groups, including Ga, including Akan, including Ewe, and so forth and so on. So when you are willing to sacrifice your own mandate to your own people in order to stand behind one particular party or another. I think that is not advisable because, again, your main responsibility is to your own people, regardless of who is in power. So if the MPP comes to power, then you have a responsibility to negotiate with them in order for the best interests of your own people. If it's NDC, then by the same token, you have your own interests, for your own people that should be paramount for you.
I see. But what are the best practices elsewhere around the world in which now we have modernity trying to interface with the traditional chiefdoms or perhaps the traditional paramountcies and authorities?
Okay, just really quick, if I can just bring up a quick point just in terms of chief, just the usage of the term, and then I'll come directly to your point. That one thing that we find, we can look, for example, at the UK. So they have a queen, then by the same token, they have parliament and other, features such as that. Now, when we use the term chief in the Ghanaian context, we should look at it in a particular light, right? And this is because when you look at the English language, there are certain value judgments that are built into the language. So whereas for, in the Europe, they would say king, queen, emperor, in the African context, they refer to us as chiefs. By the same token, they'll say they have forests, we have jungles, they have houses, we have huts, and so forth and so on. So I want us to really even look at the terminology because, we could say the chiefess of, England, but we don't do that because we have a certain degree of respect. I think that, again, my background is linguistics. I think one of the things that's incumbent upon us to do is even interrogate some of the terms that we use. Why do we accept calling our own rulers chiefs, but we refer to theirs as kings and queens? Now, to come back to your point, I was bringing up England, that they have, the system where they have, royalty, but then by the same token, you have, this, democratic system, and they're able to work out the two. I think that for our own particular context, for our own indigenous rulers, that again, I think it would be incumbent upon them to more or less stay in their lane, that if you are going to do, traditional things for your people, uphold your mandate, then again, you are just trying to interface with whichever government happens to be in power for the betterment of your own people. If you are going to decide to go into party politics, then, then that would be your lane. And then you would want to, remove yourself. Again, as I mentioned before, I saw a proclamation from the Asante Hene telling those under him that, okay, if you want to go into party politics, then step down from your stool. You should be nonpartisan. And I think that that's really the way to go.
I see. Please be on stream as we also. So does it fall in line with how the chiefs then should behave? And if that is it, how should they be behaving going forward? Because we saw in the electioneering at Atik, a lot more of the chiefs giving their support to Nana Addo, a lot more of them giving their support to John Mahama, etc. One goes wrong, and then we seem to be at the hilt and making all sorts of
I think
conclusions.
I think that we need to situate this discussion in a proper perspective. You see, sometimes I want to view this craze over endorsement of presidential candidates from two perspectives. On the one hand, you have political parties inducing some of these chiefs to come out and publicly endorse them. On the other, you have the chiefs on their own trying to do these endorsements in order to win favors from these political party leaders and so on. Either way is not good for the institution of chieftaincy. And the point ought to be made. You were asking the question about how do traditional rulers position themselves in view of changing times and what have you. I think that it is important that we recognize that the institution of chieftaincy ought to be dynamic. It should not be a static institution whereby even as trends keep changing, they are stuck with the very things they inherited, the very values, the very governance systems they inherited. I think they must be innovative enough to also, if you like, improvise so that they are able to fit well within the context of modern governance. And how are they able to do that? I think that development is such a wide phenomenon that requires everybody with some authority to be able to play a role. And so if you have traditional rulers who are supposed to be the direct individuals between the subjects and those with political power, I think that they have a responsibility, and they can define their responsibility in such a manner as to be able to also play a significant part in what we call modern governance. I think that development, like I said, they can become agents of development. How do they do that? They can begin to lobby ministers. Chiefs should not always be individuals sitting in their palaces expecting the political class to come and pay homage. They must begin to explore the possibilities of going to lobby for projects. They must also begin to, attempt to say that, look, we are traditional rulers. How do we keep our rules relevant to the changing times? And I think that to some extent, the National House of Chiefs has attempted doing some things, trying to invite or bring some relevance to the chiefs and so on. But I think individually, chiefs must partner with local authorities. They must partner with the district assemblies. They must partner with regional administrations and so on, so that they are seen to be individuals also playing a part in our development. Education is, and I was very excited when I realized Otumfuo had taken upon himself some initiatives. He instituted an education trust fund. And Ochehine, for instance, is engaged in environmental sustainability projects. These are things that redefine the relevance of our chiefs. And I think that all other chiefs must begin to situate their mandate in this context and avoid this temptation of supporting candidates either for favors or in the hope of being favored when there is a change of administration. These are things that can only succeed in reducing the respect that people have towards the institution of chieftaincy. And when we got to that point where Ghanaians no longer have regard for these institutions, I think it will be unfortunate, and gradually, like some already are beginning to question the relevance of chieftaincy. Let's not give them the fuel to continue with that discussion.
Dr. Obadele, does it mean that Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo Addo, when he now mainstreams into or begins fully as a president after his swearing in, doesn't need to deal with the Gbese Mantse, for example?
I think it would be very graceful of him to do so. You know, he could show himself to be a petty man, or he could show himself as being someone who is willing to rise above some of these things. And, you know, whatever decision he makes, it will speak volumes about his own character. Will he be vindictive, or will he be forgiven? But I also want to look at, we're talking about development, we're talking about things change, but I'd like for us to look at some of these things in terms of their historical context. The very first traditional rulers were in the Nile Valley, and what we now know as ancient Egypt and things of that nature. Name was Kemet. And when you look at the role of the traditional ruler, if you look at texts like the instructions to Mary Carre, if you look at the prophecies of Nefertiti, if you look at the autobiography of Winnie, if you look at all of these ancient texts, you find that the role of the traditional ruler is to ensure balance, order, truth, justice, harmony, righteousness, reciprocity. At that time, they referred to all of those things collectively as the concept of ma'at. Again, this is, you know, ensuring order. So I think that now let's fast forward to our current times. I think that that's one of the things that should or is supposed to stay the same, that, you know, you're looking out for the order of your people, justice among your people, truth among your people, and all of these types of things. So again, once you start to say, all right, this particular political party, I want to curry their favor and so forth and so on, that what we're seeing is the fallout from that. That, okay, well, what if that party doesn't, gain power? What happens? So again, I think in retrospect, this is kind of advising after the horse has already left the barn and trying to close the barn door. But I think there are lessons. There's a proverb in Yoruba where they say, "Enito jinsi koto kora yoku logbon," which translates to, a person who falls into a hole teaches everyone standing around wisdom, that they know there's a hole there, you shouldn't fall into the same hole. I think that moving forward, the advice that we can get from this is that you should be willing to work with whichever political party is in power, again, because your mandate is to your people and the well-being of your people. So if the NPP is in power, see how you can interface with them for the well-being of your people. If the NDC, PPP, whichever is in power, we should see, all right, this is how I should interface with them for order amongst my people, justice amongst my people, righteousness, harmony, balance, and so forth and so on.
Okay, and that'll be it for our discussions with you. But when you were monitoring the elections, did you also decide to resign your position at the African Studies Department, University of Ghana, if one of the candidates either did win or not?
I surely did not. I surely did not. I said whoever is in power, we should be working with them, because ultimately we are looking for the well-being of Ghana, the well-being of Africa, and to assume that only one particular party can do that, I don't think it would be in the best interest of any of us.
Well, thank you. Shukran. And Dr. Obadele Kambon is a fellow with the African Studies Department of the University of Ghana. And John, that's a very interesting point he made there. But,
yes,
but no matter what it is, the Akufo Addo-led government says that he's going to have an open arm and will deal with whoever is coming from any nook and cranny of the country.
Yes, I've already told you that we should forgive Gbese Mantse because of his background, and let's not hold him too much to it. Indeed, whilst he was saying that one of our lead campaigner in Ghana was Nibi Ayibonte, who is his direct nephew. So, and of course, the spokesperson to the Gbese Mantse. So, let us rise above some of these rhetoric, and like I've told you, it was unprovoked, it was needless, but because of his background as a sportsman who enjoys betting with everything going into a competition, he chose the wrong path. So let's forgive him and move on.
But you see, the difficulty I have with, forgiveness is good, but the difficulty I have...
You are very wicked, forgive.
No, the difficulty I have is, how then does he relate with the new dispensation?
Yeah.
How is he able to attract the best for his people?
And especially his people who will be at the other
That's what the point I'm... And
that's not difficult at all.
No, how is he able to attract benefits to his people, one? How does he expect his following, especially those who are not from the stock he was campaigning for, to view him and to respect him? That respect certainly is going to disappear. And once you have a situation where some of your subjects feel some disdain towards you, they tend to act disrespectfully towards you, I think it diminishes the essence and the relevance of the institution that you happen to be leading.
I think, to agree with him to a larger extent, he should apologize.
Guys, I mean,
he should publicly apologize.
Like he publicly endorsed, he should publicly apologize.
He can go using his background and everybody will forgive him. He must do something.
And the apology should not be situated in the context of, I am sorry I endorsed your opponent and you won. It should be an apology about, in the first place, even getting partisan.
Yes.
The apology should be about, I made a mistake getting partisan. I ought not to have. The laws don't even allow me to have done so.
Yes.
And so I apologize on that occasion. And then proceeds to apologize to the MPP and probably the flag bearer of the MPP, who is now the president.
The office of the Gbese.
No, he should address the press conference, not the statement. He didn't issue a statement in his endorsement.
Anyway, let's look at this though. The transition team is ongoing, and just yesterday, towards the latter part of the day, or during the discussions yesterday, a former finance minister who is leading on behalf of the president-elect from the other side, the transition team, raised certain concerns about things that we usually witness when we have transitions and those transitional periods. And we've had, there's a third one we'll be having in our history, in the Fourth Republic. What do you say to that?
Well, there has always been transitions since 1992, whether one government to itself or one government to another government. Maybe when he says this is the third time, you mean one government to another government. But there must always be a transition, even if it's the same person.
I mean from one government one party to the other.
This is the third time. And of course, anytime it is in that scenario, you tend to find a lot of issues rising up. Now, so far so good. Before, it used to be very acrimonious, but because of that past experience, we have all come out with the Transition Act. And instead of people rushing into former government officials' homes and seizing their cars and government bungalows and all that, now we have the Administrator General who has been tasked with the responsibility to eject former government officials from their homes. I mean,
if they refuse to leave in 3 months.
refuse to leave after 3 months, or let's say within.
That's the Administrator General.
Yes, the Administrator General. He is tasked with the responsibility.
That's in the Act.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now nobody stops you in the middle of a traffic and take away your car like they did to Nana Addo. You know, they seize his Land Cruisers, which eventually was not even for the state. They have to return it with apology. So we want to avoid all those unpleasant scenarios, and that is why we have the Transition Act, which now enjoins both parties, the government-elect and the outgoing government, to come out with a team where they will, exchange notes and take all the necessary information for a peaceful and cordial transition of power. And I think that is what so far we are doing. However, I've heard concerns have been raised that in this last minute, some government officials are trying to engage government in new contracts. Some are trying to employ even into the army. I think there was an advert in the dailies yesterday asking people to apply to join the military or
The Ghana Armed Forces.
The Ghana Armed Forces. And I think the government, those on the side of
The
government,
Ghana Armed Forces, can they on their own decide to recruit?
Well, but it will be problematic if within this transition period, that's when they want to recruit. They should leave
Well,
it.
the adverts were placed before the elections, I think.
No,
Well, it just came yesterday
after
the transition, and that is where people are raising concerns. And if you go to so many of the government institutions, especially the banks with government stake like NIB and Ghana Commercial Bank, and so many government institutions, it appears they are trying to recruit at an unusual rate and trying to give offer letters of employment, and take certain actions to commit the government. Assuming you give a contract at this last, of course, let nobody also say that they are government and they don't have authority to act. They are still in government. They can still commit the government. But we must be reasonable and know that certain actions that we are taking now will have consequences on the incoming government. And so as much as possible, if they can restrain themselves from doing acts that will overly affect, because when you come and you want to terminate that contract, it leads to judgment debt. You have to compensate the whoever is on the other side of the contract. And that will bring financial burden on the already difficult financial state of our economy. So I think that the government should restrain itself. We must all behave in good faith. Whether you are outgoing government or you are government elect, we must all act in good faith and not force certain
decisions on the incoming government.
It may have the consequences on all of us all, and I think that we must all act in good faith, respect the new act that has explained how transition should be done, and we must avoid committing the government in this last minute. Maybe in the Transition Act going forward in future, we may have to look at how we can restrict the outgoing government from making certain decisions that will have certain level of impact on the incoming government.
But the wheels of government must run. For example, if there are some procurement things that need to be undertaken and it has to go through contracts or contractual processes, it has to go through. If there are processes that were initiated long before an electoral period, before a transition also, and the contract is signed just because after the election and the government is going over, it also has to go through.
You see, the point is, for me, it is not about processes that began before this time.
The unusual.
The matter at issue is signing new contracts at a time when you have lost power and you are just on your way out. What you are doing is that because by those contractual obligations, you are inviting some unsolicited responsibilities and obligations onto the incoming administration, and that is problematic. And to the extent that you waited until this point to award these contracts, it tells you that these really didn't occupy the priority list of projects you wanted to undertake. Otherwise, you would have done them long before now. And like it's been suggested, governments that are going out or parties that have lost power and are on their way out should exercise utmost good faith. Because it is not in your interest, neither is it in anybody else's, that you commit the government that is coming to take over from you to certain obligations that ordinarily don't make sense. And to the extent that somebody is handed a contract, and if you are, before you can terminate such a contract, the person is entitled to some reparation, and which for me is unacceptable. Why? If you think these are even genuine projects, that is why we have handing over. The transition has been done in such a way that, at least the one we have now, has been structured in such a way that it is easy to trace up to the minutest detail things a ministry wanted to do, things it has been able to do, and things it wished it did before the change occurred. So if you thought these were priority projects, and governance is a continuum, you can state them that, look, we got to this point, we were about to award contracts, but unfortunately the change happened. So in the interest of the ministry and the work that the ministry seeks to do, it will be important that whoever is taking over from you should continue. I'm sure people who are coming to take over from you are reasonable people. If they realize these projects really were priority projects and they ought to have been done, I'm sure they'll go ahead and do the awards as you would have wanted them to do. But it is just about a subculture that has grown over a period and which we ought to terminate at some point. That anytime there is a change in government, people feel pained and they translate that bitterness into doing things to hurt whoever is succeeding them. It doesn't help anybody's cause. Because at the end of the day, if Ghana gets bad or gets worse, it is you and I who suffer the brunt. So it doesn't help anybody. And mind you, if you do these things, there will be notes to indicate, unless you want to skip these things or these details in the handing over notes. Otherwise, you'll be very well captured. And to act responsibly towards the state, sometimes, in my opinion, can make it possible for people to invite you for some legal action and so on. So we should be mindful as individuals in this enterprise of governance that it doesn't help anybody's cause to deliberately and do things that can affect whoever is coming to take over from us. But beyond that also, there is this concern. And I think it's a very legitimate concern that is, and the expression of that concern is pervasive. That we must dispel this notion that once there's a change of government, what it means is that we, the party people who have one power, everything state, everything government belongs to us. And we must assume the power of the law to go and take control of it.
Is it not because the way our constitution is structured,
no, the constitution
wins,
does not support...
does not support the takeover, but whoever wins takes over everything.
When we say winner takes all...
Within the fallow period of when you're in opposition, I mean, virtually, you're rendered redundant. It doesn't matter the type of qualification and your competencies. Unlike in the United States, Jimmy Carter, during the period of... and Jimmy Carter was a Democrat, right?
Yes.
Yeah, during the period of George Bush, was in Africa doing his campaign on guinea worm and doing all things. And he was supported greatly by the U.S. government.
Oh, but even
a U.S. government that's led by a Republican. But for us, and you have emissaries of Republicans who will be giving...
No, even Clinton.
Who will be giving
Bill Clinton was an emissary to go and negotiate the release of some US...
No, I'm not even talking only about the ex-president. I'm talking about people who may have served in various capacities in various governments of the U.S., who still do activities that lapse various governments beyond their political parties.
We have individuals too who have served...
Tell me who within the MPP period perhaps worked in anything?
No, the former information minister who became West Africa something.
And even let me even
what's
cite
the name?
even Chambers.
Even Chambers, that's what I'm trying to.
Even Chambers, for instance,
he was pushed during the NPP.
It was NPP.
No, I mean you do
even
that.
Chambers.
But I mean that locally working.
No, I get the no. I don't think that this idea of winner takes all is the justifiable basis for people to want to go and invade and even take over all state institutions and state properties, including toilets and the rest, I think it's not a justifiable basis at all. I just think it's a subculture. Yes, I think these are practices we must condemn, and we must discontinue. I appreciate the feeling of grassroots supporters that we invested energies, we invested resources in ensuring victory. But it's about how we orient them. And probably because there is some history to guide them, that in the past, things of this nature were occasioned to us. It's our time to do same. And sometimes they tend to situate these actions in the context of we are protecting state property. But mind you, there's no vacuum, there's no power vacuum. Government is still in place. It may well be that they have lost power, but they are still in charge.
Yes.
And I think that we should try as much as possible to restrain our supporters, let them appreciate. And we need to discontinue this subculture of assuming that state property and state institutions, once you win power, become naturally yours. They are not for any political party. They belong to all Ghanaians, and we must all at all times protect these state institutions and state property. But finally, the transition team. I think the president-elect has put together a very strong transition team. And I have no doubt that they will get the handing over notes as they ought to have. The first point that Nana, as a president, ought to make is to tell Ghanaians the true state of this country. It is only at that point that you can get the buy-in you need. I know very well that our economy is in a very messy state. And if you are unable to present the facts as they are, the expectations of, for Ghanaians to moderate their expectations about what you ought to do in the first year, I think you would have problems. So I'm sure the transition team will help him get the full details so that in presenting the state of the nation, he's able to present to us the state of this country as it is. And I am also expecting that he will take opportunity or you take advantage to invite every Ghanaian. The cooperation of Ghanaians at this point is very critical. We've gone past the election stage. Now I've heard people make all kinds of claims that, oh, now we are waiting to see how he feels. They are not saying we are waiting to see how he performs. We are waiting to see how he feels because according to them, the promises he made were so grandiose, very difficult, impracticable, and so on and so forth. I am expecting that irrespective of the party you belong, PNC, NDC in particular, your interest should be how do we move this country to the next level.
John,
and your cooperation is very important.
Once the transition team is in place, we expect that there will be very soon speculations about who will occupy which ministerial positions or who will be a deputy minister, etc.
Why did you mention deputy minister?
Yeah, because we seem to have a crop of young.
We usually have young ministers.
Yeah, sure.
Omani is not an old man.
Okay. Right.
And you are not by that suggestion. John Kuma is only fit for deputy.
No, so far.
Well,
no, I said ministers, the deputy
No,
ministers.
you only said deputy, and that's why.
Well, but he will not be wrong. Omani Buama was started as a deputy minister.
Well,
Before, based on his performance, he was made a
but
look, that's for the NPP. We believe in grooming. And there are some people in NDC who are ministers, they won't qualify as DC in NPP government. That is a fact. There are people who are competent and ready, and I can assure Ghanaians that Nana is ready and prepared to put up the best team because, look, the agenda is so great, we cannot afford to disappoint Ghanaians. And if anybody says that we don't know the state of the economy, then he has not followed Baumia well. At every stage, Dr. Baumia has assessed how this economy is doing. You remember his famous 170 questions to the NDC government they failed to answer. And if you go into that 170, he talks about how much resources have come over the 8 years. He talks about the abysmal performance, the corruption, what could be done and was not done, and how we could do it. So we already have, as far as I'm concerned, a fair idea about how the economy is running. We are only through this transition period going to confirm most of these issues. But what is this anxiety about the pledges the NPP made? I don't see which of the pledges are so difficult to fulfill because those promises are reasonable, they are attainable, and we are determined to fulfill them. And Nana Addo has stated that most of these issues will be addressed in his first budget. So I strongly believe that restoration of allowances and all these things, talking about free education, the next academic year starts somewhere September, October. I believe by that time, this government and the government elect should be ready to implement the education. And this $1 million to every constituency, why should we wait till next year? I think in our first budget, we should be able to have the allocation of $1 million to every constituency. And if you are talking about one village, one dam, the constituencies where Nana Addo spoke about, if you have $1 million sitting in that constituency and you want to build a dam in every village, how is it going to cost? So we don't have any difficulty implementing some of these pledges and promises we have made. I strongly believe in the vision of Nana Akufo Addo. Ghana, God has not put us on this rich soil to be poor. And I believe we are going to use the resources to make this country great.
Under grooming candidates, lawyer John Kuma, DCE.
Oh, please. I haven't asked you to give me the CE.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, my brother.
Atik Mohammed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much as well. Now, we're taking a break, but let's look at this. George Walker Bush Highway was completed in 2012 and we all know fitted with street lights as well as wire nets in the median to prevent unauthorized pedestrian crossings. The installation of the nets or the mesh were critical to deal with possible vehicular knockdowns. But if you have used the road lately, you would also realize that the wire mesh are fast being torn down as pedestrians find various points along the highway to cross over.
On the George Walker Bush Highway, vehicles literally glide at top speeds. And the frequent fatal motor accidents on this road make it one of the deadliest in the country. It's no wonder that at the main La Paz traffic light, pedestrians race across the road when the lights are red. No time to waste. But designers of the road made such crossings and the few footbridges almost a kilometer apart from each other. The result is the wire nets raised in the median to prevent unauthorized crossings have either been torn down or stolen. It means crossing the road anywhere along the busy highway is now completely unhindered.
But I'm here an old one that would say too much. Before in time for I'm offending you, it's said, they say, buy to bed and the pepper. But don't be anything, would say too much.
Now, already, almost a kilometer of the wire nets is gone, and with officials making little effort, if any, to protect such public property along the road from being stolen, the rest will only remain for as long as there are no thieves. Fifi Kumsen, George Walker Bush Highway, Accra.